am delighted to be joined on notfest.com by Amigo the Devil, an artist that I've got all the time in the world for, because I get to talk to our artists all of the time, but it's always nice to talk to someone in this floating world of rock and metal where every band has their own unique thing. To be someone who is unique in a place full of unique people is very exciting. How has the first album, touring cycle and everything as part of rock and metal's tapestry been for you as an experience, as someone who doesn't play the kind of things that usually does rock and metal festivals, etc.?
I mean, to be fair, from the beginning of this project, the only people that I really knew were in the metal community or in the hardcore community, just a little more extreme musics. So when I started reaching out to play shows with the first few demos and all that, I didn't know anybody that played acoustic guitars or anything like that. So I reached out to everybody else in the worlds that I did know, and everybody said, I don't know, this is weird, but let's try it.
Yeah.
So immediately, 2013-ish, before I had a record at all, I was being thrown onto these hardcore tours, on the grind tours, onto just different tours that I did not belong on. For me, it was home because that's where all my friends were. That's where everyone I knew was. So it was a comfortable situation socially, but it definitely took a lot of work musically and mechanically to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah.
So once I did kind of figure that out, I realized that most of the awkwardness that existed was on my end. Everybody at the shows was very welcoming, very open, very receptive to, even if they didn't like it, they just said, all right, this is weird, but hey, do your thing.
Yeah.
So once I shed that sort of, that shell that I had of, oh, this is so weird.
Yeah.
It all just flowed naturally. It all just felt absolutely like it belonged.
That's the thing. It might be a room full of fans of people that are there to see even as things as out there as grindcore that you were playing with. But it's also a room full of people that like dark, sinister music. And I bet if you asked everyone in that room if they like Johnny Cash or not, your percentage would be really, really, really high.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
I think that a lot of people have this misconception of what acoustic-based genres are. For example, I mean, country breaks down into like folk and western and a bunch of different types of music that are separate from country. But I feel like people have a blanket statement about country itself where they go, I listen to everything but country.
Right, yeah.
And then they get introduced to one or two projects where they didn't know it could sound like that, and they go, oh, I get it. Okay, maybe I do like it. And then it's varied. Every genre has so many different varied circumstances that it's hard to blanket statement hate a type of music. And I think people are to really come into that realization.
Can you explain to a foreigner what the hatred is and the suspicion is for country music? Because the thing is, there's loads of great country out there, and like nobody is going to say, yeah, Amigo the Devil, kind of like Florida Georgia Line.
No.
I
mean, the same way you wouldn't, mention Black Curse and Guns N' Roses in the same vein. It's
absolutely
worlds. So, I think it really does start with the misconception of it's all the same and it's all rooted in this sort of ignorant ideology and this sort of, I guess people don't realize how far back the history of folk and things like that really come through from an international standpoint. Like it was all brought here through means. And so there's so many different eras and so many different versions of country that the most recent pop country boom kind of thing, but just side note, I also don't even think I would label myself as country, which is really funny.
Yeah, of course.
I use it as a blanket term because it's so easy to just throw out there. But I think that it really does have a stigma behind it, with sort of a type of ignorance and sort of this. I think it's incorrect. I don't believe that stigma is a real thing, because there are incredible artists out there fighting for the correct things, for absolute humanity, for just ethical treatment of people. You know what I mean? But I think it's one of those, you're taught to hate it, so you don't give it a chance. So you just assume it's something to be hated.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I can see that. Was that part of the reason? Because people, the label of any kind of music is less to do with pigeonholing something from the outside looking in, and is more to do with helping an artist find an audience. And with that in mind, is that where Murderfolk comes from?
Oof. So Murderfolk was it's a funny story, because Murderfolk is clearly a blatant ripoff of traditional murder ballads. They already existed forever. Since music has been made and lyrics were introduced, murder has been involved.
Yes.
Murderfolk was a passing statement at one point, where it was the easiest way to describe the content at the time, early on, that I was singing about, and the storytelling aspect of it, which is essentially what folk music is. It's just traditional storytelling type of thing. And it just stuck. And I don't necessarily know why. And sometimes I get frustrated, because it does make it sound like there is only one topic being spoken about or sang about. So it does feel very restricting and limiting, although I know that most people who use the term use it loosely.
Yeah.
But I think that it really did just come up as the first words that I could think of to describe what I was doing at that time. Stories of murder folk. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it kind of just stuck.
It's a really interesting question to ask you this, because so much of your music is about storytelling, right? When you have that much space and ambience, the words are multiplied in a way that they're not on, like, God Love a Cannibal Corpse record, but it's a feeling, it's a pushing, like it's something to accentuate the heaviness, whereas in what you're doing, the lyrical narrative is a big part of it. So, with your stories being about people, would you describe yourself as a people person?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I'm kind of an idiot. I'll act like one in public, and I just like being around people. I like seeing people's sides. I do believe that people have an inherent nature to be good. I don't always talk about it, but I do believe that it's in there somewhere. And I think a lot of the storytelling is the perspectives that I do sing about have a lot to do with trying to associate the worst parts of people, and how do we identify them and relate to them, and how do we sort of realize, okay, well, this is due to something else, or this is similar to this feeling, and we can start to play with, how do we solve it? How do we understand it? How do we believe that there is something behind the terrible that is worth redeeming, kind of thing? Whether that's been successful or not, whatever it is, but I think that the storytelling aspect of it was always in my nature, as more of a detective technique than an actual story.
I can definitely understand that and hear that within your music. When you go down that kind of rabbit hole, the detective route, the songwriting route, however that is there a particular song and journey that stands out at this point in time in your songwriting career that is the definitive exploration for you thus far?
There are two on both extremes. Immediately, I can think of two. One is on one of the old EPs. I think the second EP I ever put out, long time ago. It was called The Recluse, and the story itself is written from the perspective of Ed Gein, the serial killer. Essentially, that was kind of the mindset I was trying to indulge in. To imagine, okay, let's think about the reasoning behind these terrible actions that aren't sinister. What could be the human element that caused these terrible things? And I realized to some degree, from what I can assume and the place I put myself in, not necessarily jealousy, but just the feeling of really not being satisfied with who you are and not being satisfied with your own with your own purpose in life. So it became very, very easy to write that song from an element that I understood. All the moments that I just hated who I was. All the moments that I really, really wanted to change things and didn't know how to. And it was really easy to write from that perspective when the song was actually about somebody wearing someone else's skin kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's that nice layered double meaning that really, really means a lot to me in storytelling. So that is, I think, the easiest example of the very obvious, absolute, this is this perspective, but it meant this to me, the human emotion. And then when I wrote Cocaine and Abel, that was the first time that I genuinely just wrote. It was more of a journal entry, a diary entry than anything. It didn't really relate to anything else, and that was the first time that I'd put myself in my own shoes as opposed to someone else's. But it was the same process because I was so disassociated from myself that I was able to really, really analyze, these faults and this, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know. That was those are the both just external and internal.
What caused the moment for that to flow through you on Cocaine and Abel? What was the situation that you were in that caused you to write that way?
I remember where I was, and I remember the chair I was sitting in. But what's funny is that I don't remember the feeling at all.
Right.
It was very quick. It was very much. I started playing something on the guitar. I remember that, and I sang the first few lines, and I almost related to them so much that I realized, oh, shit, this is me. I'm actually okay. Ugh. And then I just started thinking and remembering things and memories, but I don't remember the actual feeling. There wasn't like a cause. It just happened. Yeah. And it was a new element for me. So it was like, should I release this? Should I not? Is it?
Yeah.
Glad we did.
How is it? Were you getting into the psychological makeup of Ed Gein for The Recluse?
I read a bunch of books before writing that EP about it, just his story in general. And it was interesting because it all painted him as just this psychologically broken human being with a very sweet external demeanor. Everybody always considered him just a sweet old man who blah, 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 weird, but normal and not normal. Sorry, just
yeah, I know what you mean. Weird,
yeah.
But he goes about his business not chopping people up. Yeah.
And it's just so interesting to see so many perspectives in every single book that you read about the internal being so flawed and the external just being human. And I guess you see that across with a lot of serial killers in general. Most people go, oh, I could never imagine. But then you go back and you start seeing deviant behavior as it is. And Ed Gein was just interesting because of how much wasn't actual murder, and most of the real carnage of the story was like, obviously there's carnage in the murders, but so much of the story is just the grave robbing and the actual creation of elements and living amongst it, and being immersed in this completely separate world from the crimes. So that just, it stuck with me for a little while, and I really kind of got stuck in that little loop for a while.
And when it comes to right now and writing at the moment, what? So actually, let me. I'll get to that. What I should actually ask you about is taking lyrics and stories like that to the madman Ross Robinson for your debut record on Everything Is Fine. Ross Robinson is someone that I've spoken to an almighty amount of singers about over the last couple of decades, and I love it because there's always a different story, because it's about Ross as a producer tapping into the personality of the person sat in front of him. It's not about a technique or this is the way we do things here. It's about you the second you walk in the door. What was that experience like? And I ask you that as a man who hasn't brought him back for album number 2.
Well, that wasn't the reason we didn't do it with Ross wasn't necessarily because I don't want to. It was more situational, COVID, all that stuff.
Geographical, because you recorded in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Ross is just a incredibly magnetic person. Just, it's hard to not be drawn to him immediately, no matter what aspect of it is. He's just this incredible, very unique mind, and it shows in his when he looks at you. You see how unique his process in his mind is. So when he agreed to do the record, I was terrified initially because I'd heard all the stories of the stories. And I gotta be honest, like it wasn't like that. It wasn't this weird, I feel like that's all sometimes maybe exaggerated for the show. I think the real magnificent aspect of recording with Ross wasn't the dramatics. It was the actual intention behind the process itself. And you almost, I always joke, and this is a joke, but I always joke that I left that recording with more problems than I came in with. And not because of him, but because he forces you to completely shed any wall that you have, any armor that you have. You shed it in a natural way. It's not forceful, and he doesn't do it for you. He just allows you to be yourself to such a degree that you start to understand things on your own. And a large percentage of the songs that I went in with, I had this idea of what I'd written them about, and I had explanations of what they were about. And it's so funny to just hear him know that that wasn't true. So he would ask me, what's this song about? And I would say it and explain it, and I had these grand descriptors and all that. Yeah. Then he would go, okay, but what's this song about? And I'm like, oh, I just told you in my mind, And then you realize, that's what I'm saying it's about, but that's not what it's really about. And so then he sits with you and you talk through it, and you start to figure out that a lot of these songs that you had some link to are actually much, much, much deeper. And in my mind, that's kind of what allows Ross to force people deeper into their performance, into their existence, into their analysis of their own artistry, essentially. And that is something that I will never take for granted. I love him forever, and I love him. I love Ross.
I do love that while the stories are plentiful, and I've heard everything from standing on singers' backs with strippers around to everything else, but there is a common theme, and it is all what you just said about the shedding of layers, and the arrival at the truth. What did Ross Robinson teach you about yourself? What did you? It's one thing to say you came away with these extra layers, but when he forces you inside in the manner that he does, what did you come out knowing about yourself that maybe you didn't know before?
There's like 40 things coming to mind already, but
That speaks volumes.
a very easy one that I remember is that I already analyze and criticize myself way beyond what I thought I did. So when I hear stories of him not convincing, but sort of really, really drawing people's truth and emotion out of them, I think that was a step that we didn't really have to take, because I think he saw that I already am so overly critical of myself and the music and everything, and I already overanalyze everything so much that it was this different process where it was almost healing instead of breaking down, where the healing part was more of putting confidence back into the songs as opposed to trying to break down the defensive nature. It's a hard one to explain because I still haven't fully been able to realize the extreme nature of the emotional. I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to put into words. And I've always had a hard time explaining it. People, anytime someone asks me, it's just different. It's different. It's a situation.
It's very different to talking to anyone else who makes a record with anyone else on earth. And I always love that. But something that runs through singer-songwriting is the narrative is often relatable to the downtrodden and to people that feel or think in a darker manner. Is that a fair assessment of the role of the singer-songwriter? Not to kind of wax lyrical about it too much, but it does feel like they're quite frequently a vessel for those less fortunate and people from that side of the tracks.
I think it's fair, but I mean, not but. I think it's very fair. I think that the storytelling aspect and the songwriting is almost problem solving. So we all have those friends that are these grand storytellers that embellish everything and they add details to make the story better. Storytelling is essentially lying to some degree. And it's, twisting the truth to make it more interesting. And it's the same kind of thing. Anytime you hear somebody go, "Oh, but when it's good, it's really good." Like that's the definition of good. It's obviously going to be good. So that's not an interesting story. A story about something being good doesn't matter because it is what it is and no one cares to know further. It's just, all right, fine. So when you add the problem solving aspect, I think that's where it naturally comes into play, where you have these characters that you want to set up a story for, and you have to have some sort of conflict in it to resolve at the end. Whether the resolution is positive or negative, a story about somebody where everything goes right isn't interesting. So I think that naturally draws anybody that is trying to create that element, create those worlds of their own, is naturally going to be drawn to a negative side of anything to create that conflict to resolve.
It's also, as humans, we don't question why we're happy, but we do question why we're sad. So there's way more depth to it.
Yeah, we're taught to problem solve, and we're taught to change our situation if it is in any of the realms that are not socially acceptable, that are not happy. If you're successful, cool. Just do your thing. Keep doing what you're doing. If you're successful. If you're happy, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're upset or if you're sad, no one really tells you, cool. That's an interesting emotion that we have. Dwell in it, live in it, explore it, see what it means to you. Everyone goes, well, how can I make you not sad? And they start around and all that. Our instinct is to change these emotions as opposed to experience them. And I think that we've absolutely learned that from just so many years of content telling us that we shouldn't be this way. We shouldn't have that emotion. I don't think there's anything wrong with being sad every once in a while. Like if you wake up and you have a shit day, have it.
Yeah.
Live it. Maybe that's what you need. And I wish we could embrace that as opposed to just have that fear of, well, this is forever. I'm now sad forever. My friend is now done because he's sad today. And it really does take away a huge, this huge side of humanity. And it makes us these little machines of, well, if we're not achieving these two emotions, if we're not working towards these two emotions, our life is a waste or our life is trash. And I feel like that's where people start to criticize themselves to a point where they don't allow themselves to exist as themselves. So many of us find things that we're not happy with that don't give us pleasure or passion because they're not making us, joyous.
Yeah, I agree. And it's only amplified in a social media age where there's an added pressure to put forth the idea of happiness and to put forth the idea that, like, hey, everything in my life rocks.
Yeah. We take 30 of the same picture so we can go and pick the best one, and which one expresses the best emotions. And it's like, sometimes things suck. That's okay.
So true.
Hey, like it's fine.
And does that alter the way that God, this is a deep one, so bear with me. Does the mindset of the world influence how you're songwriting at the time? Or is your train of thought more universal than that?
It used to not affect me, and I think that's because I lived in my own world. And over the years, I think the more I involve myself in adult situations or whatever responsibilities that I've found myself in now, I think that I do allow it to affect me a lot more than I used to. So every once in a while I do have the same thought of, well, I used to be better, or I used to be this and that. And I find myself trying to go back to what I was as opposed to trying to figure out where I am and how to move forward from that. So it's a weird situation where I don't know why I started letting the world affect me. And I think that does sort of show in the songs themselves, where they are a lot more personal now. They are more internal as opposed to just fiction. I mean, a lot of them are still fiction, but
yeah.
And I don't know if that's due to age or due to a more immersive social media experience. I personally really hate social media. I have a big problem with it. It messes me up. I get sucked in, and it ruins me. So I try to stay away as much as I can, a lot more than I used to.
Do you mind if I ask what it is about it specifically?
I think that it creates, so we always say like, oh, social media connects us so much, but I think that it's created this it's lowered the bar so much of social responsibility, where now seeing your friends' posts is enough to say that you are keeping up with your friends.
Yeah.
Oh, I only use Facebook to keep up with what my friends are doing. And it's so quick and there's such little blips, and there's such fictitious little blips, and they're created. Like people have time to sit down and think about what they're going to write and how they're going to write it and how to present it. So in our minds, we're keeping up with our friends, but we're keeping up with the side that they've created for us to see, right? And so instead of once a month calling your friend and having an hour and a half long discussion, or 30 minutes, doesn't matter, of just catching up naturally, where you don't have time to process that world, you don't have time to create this fictional story, and you get these real human emotions, going to see your friend when we could see people. Now we've completely detached ourselves physically and removed that responsibility of our social nature, because we can just scroll and see what we think is the equivalent of catching up. So we're just growing further and further and further apart, and we're just showing each other less of reality and putting ourselves into these weird self-created bubbles. And you see people start to lose it and change, and you see people start to post, all right, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just bothers me. It takes away a lot of humanity, in my opinion.
I'd never considered it. I think you're spot on. It's weird, because I do feel that, especially as someone that lives on the other side of the world from all the people that they grew up with. You're right, we do only talk about one shade of my life that has many. That's a very astute thing to pick up on. As a songwriter that has to connect with people in an emotional way, does this shit make that more difficult? I have days where I'll level with you, mate. Just in the current environment, I have days where I just don't feel like I relate to humanity anymore. I think loads of us will have gone through that at various different sides, no matter what political side of the fence you lean on or whatever. I think there will be various points in time over the course of this last pandemic situation where you will just look at civilization and go, I don't get this anymore.
Bring on the meteor.
Yeah, right? Does that affect you as a songwriter?
It does. It does quite a bit. I think luckily I've had a very, very good support system around me, with family, with the friends that I do have nearby and all that, the friends I talk to, and they do help me shake it. But a lot of times I feel this strange responsibility to present something that people want to see from me, as opposed to presenting what I want to share. And I think a lot of it, luckily none of it has actually affected the final product. I've been very, very fortunate to have the people in my life to help just shake me, fucking get it out. But I do go through weeks at a time where I lose myself entirely in my own mind of just, this is what everyone wants, because this is what I'm reading that they want. Because I see it. It's now all cataloged on the internet. And
yeah.
I'm like, well, now I have to write more songs like this because this is blah, blah. And, I guess musicians have always had that problem with trying to recreate what did work. And I try really hard not to. I've always tried really, really, really hard to not redo something, because it already exists. It's there. That thing is there. If you want to hear that, listen to that. I want to move forward and figure out how to do something better, how to do something different. So that whole internet world really, really does make it throws it in your face a lot more, because it's just there all the time. Every time you open Every time you check the time on your phone, it's a little notification that says, "You suck." Or
Yeah.
yeah,
You get those comments too, huh?
don't we all? It really has given people uh, a completely different and separate personality from themselves to be able to do whatever it is they want. And there has to be a positive to it where I'm assuming it's given some people the confidence to share things and do things that they wouldn't have normally. So I'm not saying it's all negative. I'm sure there's a positive side to it.
Yeah.
But it's just it's all about extremes now. It's just these extremes. It's not like you can't just no one sits there and listens to a song and types a comment. I don't really like this, but whatever.
Yeah.
This is the worst song I've ever heard in my
Yeah.
life. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't mind if you don't like it. It's cool. It's not for everyone. I get it.
Yeah.
But the
Listen
worst?
to my comment of all of the comments. I am saying the most extreme thing. I hear you.
I think it's also brought out a huge element of. I think it really has made elitism worse as well. I think elitism has truly become a much different beast than it used to be, because it is a lot more transparent now, and there's a numerical aspect to elitism now, where if you see this many people have liked this thing, it's now a numerical factor where you can be the one of 10,000 that is, this is blah, 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 whatever.
Mate, dude, I went to sleep one night, I woke up the next morning and Ghost were a meme. I was like, what the fuck just happened? Hold on, everyone has spent the last 5 or 6 years liking Ghost. I went to sleep and I woke up and now they are a meme band. What the fuck just happened? No, I know what you're saying. What's interesting about elitism when it applies to Amigo the Devil, though, is with there not being as many, like, quote-unquote scene politics around what you're doing and gatekeeping around those aspects, how much does elitism affect you as an artist, not just as a human being looking at his phone going, stop?
We have been incredibly fortunate that, for the most part, the large majority have been very kind and very understanding and very supportive. I feel insanely lucky that people have been receptive, or if they don't like it, they've just moved on, right? And that's one of the, kind of going back to the first question about playing metal shows as an acoustic artist and all that. Same thing. Nobody really no one gave me hell. Nobody was problematic. Nobody was going, oh, look at this loser with an acoustic. It was really, really pleasant, and it was very affirming for my view of humanity, because I was like, damn, you're all fucking awesome. Like, you're all incredible. Thank you. Like, thank you for at least giving it a chance and then letting it go if you didn't like it. Thank you. I think maybe that's one of the benefits of not really having a home in a genre. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
So it's been a fun journey trying to figure it out. And every once in a while I sit there and I'll mope and I'll say, I wish I belonged somewhere easily. I wish I could say, I play this kind of music. It's done. I have my peers. I have bands I can associate with. And it always comes back to just feeling very, very fortunate that people have been so kind.
Like, we are going to have you back on the show in April to talk exclusively about the new record. But I'd like to give you the flip to that, which is, like, I go to all kinds of shows. Like, literally, it's been my job for 2 decades to go to shows. And there's something about that we don't get a lot in this world. I've seen all kinds of bands in various different eras. But your shows and your words affecting people in the way they do, and people listening to your words, taking it in and feeling the things that your words means to them, and being in a room of those people stood next to each other is truly one of the most special live experiences in the world of rock and metal, I think. And I can't wait to have the new record, and I can't wait to be in the room with those people at some point, hopefully in 2021. But I'll let you go, and I'll catch up with you again in a couple of months. Really nice to catch up again, man. And we'll chat in a couple of months, and we'll talk exclusively new record stuff.
And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, amigo. All the best, man.